G'day folks, have you heard of the internet? Well, here in Australia we haven't. That makes it a bit harder to work or study from home, but more importantly, it makes it harder for the gamers. Well, just play offline single-player games, I hear you say. And that's a great idea, but something's happening to them, and I'm gonna get to the bottom of it. Let's start with what might be my favourite game of all time, despite coming from what is now one of the shittiest studios of all time. Warcraft 3. Released in 2002, as the name suggests, it was the third game in the Warcraft RTS series. I played it religiously as a kid, and as a teen and an adult too. I loved the campaign and the custom games that took up about 90% of our time at LAN parties. Now before you say it, yes, I know that Warcraft 3 had an online component, and it was great, but it also had an exceptional storyline and single player experience. It wasn't just me that enjoyed it though. It was a huge success all across the board. When it was released, it went on to sell millions of copies and became the fastest selling PC game of all time. The Frozen Throne, its expansion, also sold really well, so what did they do with the series next? In 2004, Blizzard released World of Warcraft, taking the characters, stories, and universe that they created that so many of their players had loved, and allowing them to enjoy it with their friends in a really new kind of way. Now, I never really played World of Warcraft that much, but I know plenty of people who still do fanatically to this day. As an MMORPG, it's pretty obvious that World of Warcraft can't be played offline. But Warcraft 3 was so successful, surely they'll get to Warcraft 4 soon enough. In the meantime though, WoW was incredibly popular and, more importantly, incredibly lucrative. It was subscription based. So instead of just paying once to get the game and keep it forever, you had to pay every month to keep playing. Naturally, this meant more money, so they churned out more content for it pretty regularly. But they did get to Warcraft 4 eventually, right? Well, no. As I said, WoW was and still is making them heaps of money, so they want to support it as much as they can to keep their player base high. I mean, they'd probably keep their player base a bit higher if they weren't such a toxic, awful company, but in failing that, they've churned out 8 major expansions over the years and countless content updates within those expansions. They may be past their peak in terms of concurrent players, but this doesn't mean they don't still rake in a lot of money. But why does that mean that we don't have Warcraft 4? Especially when StarCraft 2 in 2010 was so popular. To be fair, WoW doesn't kill Warcraft 4 just by itself, but Blizzard only has so much staff and resources to pour into the Warcraft franchise, what with StarCraft, Diablo and Overwatch and all their other games to think about. So most of those resources are going towards World of Warcraft at the moment. It's also worth noting that because of the continuous support for World of Warcraft, all of the characters and storylines have progressed so far that Warcraft 4's potential storyline would have to be radically different from its predecessors. Another part is that Blizzard's other teams have all moved on to different games. Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch, Diablo 3, Diablo 4, Hearthstone. Some of these games still have significant online support, and all of them have significant online functionality. In fact, some of them can only be played online, but we'll get to that later. The point is that these online games clearly seem to be making them more money than a potential sequel to an RTS game, which at this point is a bit of a dwindling genre. I could always play Warcraft Reforged, but that's a whole nother video. Anyway, I've said enough about Warcraft, let's move on to another game series that's gone online. I've talked about the Elder Scrolls series before, twice now. I adore Oblivion and Skyrim. I've put hundreds of hours into both of these games. Now, Oblivion came out 4 years after Morrowind in 2006. Skyrim came out 5 years after that in 2011. It's now been 10 years, and what do we have? Skyrim Anniversary Edition coming November 11th. But also Elder Scrolls Online. Released in 2014, it's another MMORPG, so not a far cry from the original genre or format, but it too has continuous content updates and expansions. Now, ESO is made by ZeniMax Online, where the single-player games are made by Bethesda Game Studios, so it's not exactly the same as Blizzard. However, ZeniMax owns both, so it's probably pretty fair to say that the Elder Scrolls resources have been heavily skewed towards Elder Scrolls Online. Not to mention the fact that Bethesda Game Studios has had Starfield, Fallout, and more Skyrim to do since Skyrim. They claim that they're working on the next one now, but as I've said before, I don't think we'll see it before 2025, and I reckon we would have seen it a bit sooner if it hadn't been for Elder Scrolls Online. Speaking of Bethesda, Fallout got a similar treatment. I know that the latest single-player installment of Fallout was a bit more recent in 2015, but there seems to be this irresistible lure of taking franchises online. Fallout 76 was basically like the reverse World of Warcraft. I mean, I'm sure it made them a lot of money, but it was widely considered as garbage the second it came out, instead of taking a good 10 to 15 odd years to become trash like WoW apparently has. This one is a bit interesting though, because the unmitigated failure of Fallout 76 has the potential to make Bethesda be like, oh shit, we really don't know what we're doing, let's just go back to what works. Let's move on to a different game. Rockstar's Grand Theft Auto V. One of the best-selling games in history, it released in 2013 with both single-player and online modes. Well-received, ambitious, and super fun. There's no denying GTA 5 is a great game to this day, but it's the same story as the other games on this list. It's been 8 years and they're still re-releasing different versions of GTA 5. We haven't heard anything about GTA 6, and that's not to say that I feel entitled to get it, but I feel like I know why there hasn't been any progression in the series. It's because GTA Online is still making them so much money. It's not subscription based, but it is filled with microtransactions that make it ridiculously lucrative. GTA 5 single player never really got any DLC or meaningful extra content. All of their resources have been devoted to GTA Online since release. In fact, there have been dozens of DLCs and content updates for GTA Online over the last 8 years. What's next? Rockstar again. Red Dead Redemption 2 released in 2018 to similar commercial and critical success. Great game, sunk many hours into it, but just like GTA, it has an online mode that receives all the attention of the dev team. All of the updates and content go to online, none to the base game. Now before I go any further, I just want to stress that these single player games don't need any DLCs or content heavy updates. I've enjoyed playing all of the games that I've listed, and I don't feel entitled to any sequels or extra content, but it does seem to show an interesting trend for some of these studios and franchises. I think it's a lot easier for an online game to make money through subscriptions, paid content, and microtransactions than it is for a one-off purchase of a single-player game, and it's always in the interest of these companies to be profitable. It does kind of suck though when some of the content is either hidden behind a paywall or you have to sink a fair amount of real-world money into the game just to sort of play it properly. You know what does piss me off? Always on DRM. If I'm playing a game alone, even if it has online capability, why do I have to be connected to the internet to play it alone? This issue is, once again, most prominent with Activision Blizzard, just to add to the shit show. Essentially, if you play on PC, you have to use Battle.net to play their games, which means you have to be online always, even if you're just playing a Call of Duty campaign or Crash Bandicoot 4. They have a long history of doing this too. People weren't happy when they did it to StarCraft 2. They weren't happy when they did it to Diablo 3. They weren't happy at the entirety of Warcraft 3 Reforged. I get that it's meant to prevent piracy, but in some cases, games that use always-on DRM haven't even prevented pirates, and instead have just been a pain in the ass to people that bought the game legitimately. And also, if you're like me currently and have a bit of a rocky internet connection, this issue is extremely annoying. As I said before, it's not all studios that move their franchises online or have raging controversy burners for always-on DRM, but these examples represent huge player bases. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that games shouldn't be multiplayer or shouldn't have an online component. Clearly millions of people enjoy these online games. I'm also not saying that single-player games aren't still coming out, both big and small. Online games have not killed single-player games, contrary to what people on the internet say. I myself am still anxiously awaiting the release of heaps of single-player games, not to mention still playing existing ones. Just look at God of War or even Red Dead 2. I know I complained about Red Dead Online, but these games don't need DLCs to be fun, nor do they need sequels. I'm not crying myself to sleep over not having Elder Scrolls 6 or Warcraft 4. I cry myself to sleep just fine without the help of video games, thank you very much. That being said, I'm interested to see if this trend spreads further. I'm not much of an MMO guy myself, and I don't really have the time or money to sink into GTA or Red Dead Online, so I'd love to see these franchises in a single player format again. But hey, if that never happens, I've still got plenty of games to play, just not online, because, yeah, my internet's trash. Can you tell that I'm salty about my internet? Anyway, thanks for watching. Feel free to let me know if you disagree. Maybe you do think that online games have spoiled offline gaming. I personally think it's just a small yet annoying trend, but like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and have a good one.